2023 was not what I was expecting from gaming, and I mean that both in a good way and a bad way. The deeper question, perhaps, at least for me, is what does this mean for 2024? I mean, let's face it, this year we've seen some amazing successes as well as some spectacular failures. Baldur's Gate 3 is still riding high, both with player numbers and positive reviews. Starfield, meanwhile, continues to slide, despite Bethesda's hopes for this being a 12-year mega hit. Space games, meanwhile, have also taken a bit of an unusual turn. In fact, 2024 looks to be taking that genre increasingly away from spaceflight towards a broader context where an increased emphasis is being placed on activities outside the spaceship. EVE Vanguard is a great example of that. As you're watching this video, the first public playtests of this ground-based on-foot shooter are taking place. Despite the EVE universe very much being about spaceships, the latest game, Vanguard, is about as far away from spaceships as you can get. This then is a growing trend for the genre, and my feelings on that are very much mixed. Mixed feelings are pretty common though when it comes to something that's different or unique. But something I don't have mixed feelings on is today's sponsor, who just might make for some wonderful holiday gifts. When I'm on the move, I prioritise carrying as little bulk as possible, and Ridge excels in offering slim solutions. Ridge is revolutionising everyday items with their stylish, practical and customisable products. The slender RFID blocking wallets can accommodate up to 12 cards and cash, while the sleek key case sets new standards in everyday carry. For me, this is ideal, especially when taking trips. This holiday season then, I'm looking forward to gifting Ridge wallets to my loved ones. With Ridge's current offer of up to 30% off their wallet and key case bundle, it's a perfect time. Every relevant product comes with an AirTag attachment, ensuring you'll never misplace your essentials. Ridge products are backed by over 80,000 5-star reviews, a 99-day risk-free trial and a lifetime warranty. Gifts then that you can rely on. Don't miss their biggest sale of the year. Visit ridge.com/obsidianand for fantastic holiday offers and a chance to win a Ridge bundle valued at $4,000. Now, interestingly, EVE Vanguard serves as a great example of my uncertainty about games in 2024. On the one hand, it is potentially a repeat of old mistakes, and repeats of old mistakes is something that has led to many of the massively failed games this year. But on the other hand, EVE Vanguard really does show the dedication that the developers of EVE Online have towards their game world. If this year showed anything, it's that developer dedication can lead to amazing things, hence Baldur's Gate 3 and Phantom Liberty, just to name two examples. EVE Vanguard then is a game that could go in either direction. On the one hand, CCP have already tried the first-person shooter element before. Back in 2013, they released Dust 514 exclusively on the PlayStation 3. This was a game that was intended to directly link to EVE Online, so this should have led to a situation where you'd had two separate games that were both interlinked into the same game world, where each could affect the other. Ultimately, the project failed. There just wasn't the player interest. But jump forward 10 years and CCP are aiming at repeating the same goal. An FPS game that is set within the EVE universe and is directly tied into EVE Online. Two separate games then that are interlinked. Now personally, I think it's great that CCP aren't afraid to try this again. Yes, it seems they might have learnt the lesson of keeping players together. Vanguard is available on PC and can be played directly from the EVE Online launcher. The good news is that thanks to playtests, we should know more about this one very soon, and I'm hoping that this is going to be a pleasant surprise for 2024. After all, EVE Online is still immensely popular. I still remember playing the first day of beta all the way back in 2003, and today it regularly has 24-hour peaks of 31,000 concurrent players, with an average number of around about 20,000 players or so. That's a lot more than many other space games can claim, and it's impressive after 20 years. So yeah, EVE certainly has a large audience, and there's a lot of interest in it still. On Twitch right now, EVE has 2,100 viewers, largely thanks to the current Vanguard test. However, Sully Gnome shows that EVE Online itself regularly has 1,500 viewers on Twitch. By comparison, Elite Dangerous is peaking at between 250 to 300 viewers. Ultimately, EVE's continued success is thanks to the dedication of CCP, who clearly aren't afraid of taking risks and experimenting despite numerous historical setbacks. Another example of a dedicated team is Kerbal Space Program 2, and this one was one of my most anticipated space games for 2023. It launched into early access during the first part of the year and immediately fell flat due to limited gameplay and extremely bad performance. Since then, unfortunately, player numbers have remained pretty low. As of this recording, SteamDB shows 112 concurrent players with a 24-hour peak of 250 players. The thing is, however, that Intercept Games have continued to work on KSP2, and they have a big update launching on the 19th of December. The For Science update brings a lot of new content that players have been waiting for since day one. But the real question is just how much will this actually help? We've seen that bad launches, even in the case of early access, don't necessarily mean the game cannot recover, but it requires time, dedication, perseverance, and most importantly of all, the need to regain both the trust and interest from the audience. After all, regaining audience respect and trust is something that we know is possible. Thanks to No Man's Sky and Cyberpunk 2077, we see that has happened. However, it's not immediately clear if this is going to be possible for KSP2. The For Science update is going to be very telling in this regard. The update's certainly going to give us an indication as to what we can expect out of KSP2 into 2024. Now, another game I'm uncertain about in terms of 2024 is Starfield. To be clear, my uncertainty doesn't come down to my personal feelings towards the game. What I'm actually uncertain about is what the player reaction towards the game will actually mean for it. Let's be clear, it's obvious that there are a lot of people out there who deeply enjoy Starfield, but it's also be clear that something about Starfield is pushing many other players away. Right now, there's more people playing Skyrim on Steam than there is people playing Starfield. What's more, Starfield currently has a Steam recent reviews rating of 55%, compared to Skyrim's recent review rating of 88%. Now, there's a general feeling out there, at least from some quarters, that the negative feeling towards Starfield are being generated by content creators. This is something I really do disagree with. Sure, it's certainly something that has happened with some games and probably happened early on with Starfield, but I feel that at this point Starfield's problems are more deeply rooted. And this is one that is partially due to expectations not being met, and some people did have unrealistic expectations. But more than that, I think there's some fundamental design issues with Starfield. Some of these areas I've spoken about in other videos, so I won't go into those details here again. In short though, there's a very real solid reason for the negative sentiment. But can this be turned around? Well, as we've seen, that is certainly possible. In fact, Bethesda themselves have managed to turn sentiment around with Fallout 76, so there's certainly a good example of this being possible, and they do have experience with doing it. However, Bethesda also sometimes appear to be their own worst enemy. Recently, they started replying to negative reviews on Steam, which caused some backlash. More recently, however, they have released paid mods for Skyrim, and this has caused quite a bit of negativity. It's one of the reasons Skyrim's recent reviews are sitting at 88% compared to the long-term score of 94%. The issue here is that back in 2017, Bethesda released the Creation Club and started charging people for extremely basic mods that were fan-created. This went down like a lead balloon, as you might expect, but with the community, and was eventually removed. Bethesda seemed unwilling to let the idea go, however, and the latest version of all this is called Creations. This time around, it seems the fan-created mods that are being sold are of a much higher quality than with the previous attempt. And to be clear, the creators do get a cut of the money from this, so it's not a case that the modders are not making any money and Bethesda are taking it all. Modders can make some cash from doing this. However, the community reaction overall hasn't been exactly led by excitement. But time will tell how this one ultimately unfolds. I think the lesson here then that 2023 has really highlighted when it comes to gaming, and this isn't just limited to the examples that I've listed in this video, there's many other examples, but the lesson by and large is that developers and publishers who are tone deaf are generally setting themselves up for failure, whereas developers and publishers who pay attention to the wishes and desires of gamers are more often than not opening up to the best chances of success. 2023 has been littered with such examples. Everspace 2 was my personal favourite space game of the year. Developers Rockfish repeatedly listened to player feedback throughout the early access development cycle, and this worked out for them, and the final game is really good. Larian Studios likewise closely listened to player feedback during the early access and development of Baldur's Gate 3, and we all know how that story played out. More importantly, perhaps, is that it feels to me as though the decisions made by Rockfish for Everspace and by Larian Studios for Baldur's Gate 3 are decisions that were made by gamers. Perhaps that sounds cringe, but yeah, at this point these games are not really made by boardroom executives. At least it doesn't feel that way. It feels like they're really made for gamers. And we saw a lot of great games this year, all feeling as though they were made by people who generally understand gamers and what gamers want. Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, Phantom Liberty, Armored Core 6, System Shock Remake, and many more. Meanwhile, it feels as though the studios that are making games based purely on business decisions, or at least decisions that are removed from gaming, have failed again and again, and there's been some really terrible games this year. Lord of the Rings, Gollum, Kong Island, Walking Dead are all examples of very bad games that are poorly designed. But it's not just games that are badly made, it's games that have had bad decisions behind them. They're either released at the wrong time, or have poor IP licenses, or just otherwise have poor gameplay mechanics. The recent Warhammer Age of Sigmar Realms of Ruin is an example of exactly this, a game released at the wrong time, perhaps to the wrong audience as well. It feels to me that games like this are not made for gamers, instead they're made by executives, and they're primarily driven to try and make a profit. Of course, all games are out there for the most part to make a profit, but when that's the primary focus in designing the game, you tend to end up with something that's not that good. My feelings then for 2024 are very much mixed. Whilst there's a selection of titles that I'm really looking forward to, notably Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Space Marine 2, Black Myth, Wukong, Hellblade 2 and many others, I'm uncertain about the year as a whole, because so much of what is going on in the gaming industry is being led by bad decisions, where the interest of gamers are not being placed first. All that then brings me back to the point I opened with. 2023 for me then is a year where things were not quite what I expected they would be. It's a year which has really highlighted the gains, the benefits and the pitfalls and, well, terrible parts of the gaming industry. Of course, we've seen massive amounts of layoffs, and this really is a terrible side effect, both of what's going on within the gaming industry and I guess perhaps with what's going on with the economy at large. This really is a subject that deserves its own video. When it comes to gaming specifically though, I think 2023 has been a great year for gaming, but it's also been a bit of a divisive one. It's been a year unlike any other where we've seen very clearly what works and what doesn't work. The question then is whether or not this is a sign for the future. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments section, I'd love to hear from you. Also, I'd like to thank Ridge for sponsoring this video. Do check out that link in the video description.